Hi, welcome to episode 2. My name is James. I'm a creative artist from New Jersey. In this episode, we're going to talk about some of the fundamental drawing shapes, the most basic drawing shapes: the cube, the cylinder, the sphere, the triangles. I'm also going to go over S curves, C curves, and the T. What is the principle of the T, and how does it work, and how can you use it in your drawings? I'll also discuss some other things like stippling and cross-hatching, and if I have some other time, I will fit some other content in as well. So I hope you enjoy episode 2. Please subscribe. I'll be doing these shows weekly. All right, you could follow me at Marz Lumo, Marz_Lumo on Instagram or on TikTok. And I have a website at www.marzlumo.com. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy.
I'm going to start off by this episode off by discussing the basic shapes for drawing and painting. Most basic shapes are the ball, or a sphere, as you would call it. These are really bad looking spheres. Let's draw some more. Sphere, cube, triangle, and a cylinder. It's not enough to think about these shapes in like a two-dimensional aspect, as you see here. When you're drawing, you want to actually draw through the object and get a feel for how it actually moves in space as well. They're not flat shapes. It's not just a circle or just a square. These shapes actually have depth to them, so you want to think about them in a three-dimensional aspect. When you're drawing things on the page, you want to be able to give your drawings depth, or whatever it is you're drawing. You want to be able to give the aspect or the illusion of depth. So by doing this, you are physically drawing through the shapes and tilting them back in space. For instance, you see the triangle, right? If you think about the triangle in a two-dimensional aspect, it's just the triangle, right? If you think about it in a three-dimensional aspect, this triangle can tilt in different ways in space. How can it tilt in space? How does it move in space? And this is the way that you want to think about things when you're drawing. This is the way that I consistently think about the way things are when I'm drawing. And it takes a little bit of getting used to think about these things in a three-dimensional way versus thinking about them in a flat aspect. These are all the basic shapes that you'll build upon, though. You always start constructing a drawing, figures, or any kind of object. Say you wanted to draw a lamp, for instance. A lamp might have a base or a vase. Let's say a vase of flowers. The base might be base might be a ball, right? And there might be a cylinder coming out of that ball. So this is how you think about constructing things. And you're thinking in a three-dimensional aspect the entire time. Like, how are these things moving in space? How can I put them on the page and give them a three-dimensional feel? And this is for everything that you draw. For instance, the head. The head is always a ball shape. It starts with a ball, right? Or a sphere. And you build upon that with the cylinder, which would be like the mask shape. And how is this tilting in space? These are the questions you're asking yourself when you're drawing with the basic forms. How is this head tilted in space? Is it looking up? It might be looking up. So these are all the basic shapes that you want to use in your drawings at all times. And the more you do it, the more you use shapes, the more you can figure out how things are tilting in space. The easier it gets to actually draw things, or you'll be able to think of things in a third dimension. You'll be able to think of things with a third dimensional feel rather than being just flat on the page, existing flat on the page. All right, so I'm talking about basic shapes. So other things that I wanted to talk about with you guys today too. I'm going to clear this off so we can see better. So we just discussed basic shapes, basic drawing shapes. Other things to discuss: the C curve or the S curve, and how these relate to the actual whatever it is you're drawing. You know, for instance, the C curve. You find a C curve in a heart, right? Those are two C curves. You can always find the C and the S curve in drawing a figure. Primarily, the C and the S curve are always found in figures. For instance, you have a C curve going this way, and the way that I've always learned about the C and the S curve is two backward C's will create the S, right? The illusion of the S. And this is a way that you work in a figurative aspect. If the C goes one way, and it's going, there's always a complementary C going in the opposite direction. It's like push and pull. So the C will be going one way, and then the C will go the other way in the opposite direction. And this is what creates rhythm, especially in your figures. So I use the C and the S to give myself a sense of the figure all the time. All the time. How is the C... How is, I can use the C shape for, drawing a head. Or drawing the torso, even at that. Finding the basic rhythms of the torso. You got the ball shape, right? C. And then another C, and then another C. Here we go. We have the head. And then we have the T. So the principle of the T. What is the T shape? The T is actually a way for you to get around drawing points around a figure or an object. So we have the C shape. Let's clear the canvas again. So we talked about basic shapes. We talked about C curve, the S curve, and now we're going to talk about the T principle. The T principle of of the T. And how does the T work in your drawing? So say for instance you have a piece of reference image. Let's see if I can pull up a piece of reference image here for you guys. Let's see. Import image. And I will show you guys how I actually use the T in my drawings. If I can get the piece of reference to open. Okay, so this is an actual drawing from Henri Daumier, or a sculpture from Henri Daumier. And I'm actually just going to trace around it just to give you the principle of the T. So you see how the T is basically a way of finding points around your drawing, or whatever it is you're drawing, to get like an overall consistent shape. So I'm basically finding the T shape all around this. See the T, 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 and these are all T shapes. And what it's doing is it's creating an outline, or like a big generic shape with these T's. See how it's kind of like, you know, how and you can manipulate this T in any aspect that you want, you know. It's not just a standard T. The T is, you know, sometimes the T might have, the top of the T will be like that, and the base of the T will come down. But see how I'm using the T shape to actually get around the entire drawing to figure out how things work together. It's all T's. Look at it. Let's clear this off again, and I'm just going to give you another example of the T. Let's see. Import another image. If it works. I'm trying to find a piece of reference for you guys here. Let's see. Reference photos. I don't want to bring up anything. I cannot get these to, to open. Alright, so I'm having issues opening files, apparently. So the T-shape is basically a way of getting around the drawing, the outlines of a drawing, and figuring out points. And you can actually use the T to create curves too. So, you know, you outline a T or whatever, you have the T shape all the way around. And I use the T to create curves as well, to help me create curves. You see how the T is now creating a way for me to create curves with that T as well. Alright, so we had I discussed the basic shapes. I discussed the C curve. I discussed the S curve. Principle of the T. The T works as a way to basically get around shapes and figure out a generic overall shape of an object. Last thing I wanted to really talk about too is when ways that you guys can create the illusion of shadow and texture and in your drawings. So I see some people just kind of just when they draw, a lot of people will just like do shading, like, you know, they'll color it in, they'll want flat burst of shading. You know, you'll see a lot of gray areas or smudges. One thing that you want to think about is cross-hatching. So cross-hatching is just basically a series of lines that intersect each other like this. And the more you build them up, the more you build these lines up, the more you can create the illusion of depth. So let's say for instance we have a sphere that we want to create. A sphere that we want to create in the third dimension and give it some kind of depth. So I'll outline the sphere, and then we can create cross-hatching to go around and fit within, follow the shape to give it the illusion of depth. And this is all quick and rough and just dirty drawing today to give you guys just my ideas, or give you guys the ideas that I always approach a drawing with. So you see how the sets of lines are just creating the illusion of depth over time. Like the more that you hatch, and you can keep your lines as fine as you want, or you can go as thick as you want. There's other ways of using cross-hatching too. You can do a weave pattern, where it's a basket weave type pattern, where one set of lines goes one way and another set goes another way. So these are ways that you can actually use your pen or whatever you're using to ink with, even a pencil, to create the illusion of depth. Another way is stippling. Stippling is just basically a series of dots over time. So same way it works as hatching. The closer you get your lines together, the more you build the lines up, the darker it's going to get. And stippling is just a series of dots, and it works in the same aspect. You can create texture with stippling. And even in cross-hatching, you can create texture as well. The illusion of depth and texture in those two drawing techniques. Alright, so let's clear one more time here. We talked about basic shapes. Basic shapes: the sphere, cube, the cylinder, triangle, and we talked about giving them thinking about them in a three-dimensional versus being flat 2D. So you always, when you use these shapes, you want to use them to build upon other things. So, for instance, you think about how a cube tilts in space, and you can just build things upon things. So, I don't know, a car, for instance, in a perspective. Well, there you go. You know, I used the cube quickly and roughly to give myself a general idea of how a truck or a car is built. Alright, so basic shapes we went over. We went over the C curve and the S curve, and how the C curve and the S curve always work together. So two C's going in opposite directions create the S, right? And this is how you're going to create rhythm and movement in your drawings with the C and the S. Wherever there's a C, the S, or wherever there are two C's, wherever there's a forward C, there's going to be a backward C. And that's how they work together. They work together to create a sense of rhythm. Alright, so C curve, S curve, and we talked about the principle of the T and how the T, you can use the T to create an overall general shape of whatever it is that you are drawing. And how the T, you can use the T as a foundation to create curves. And lastly, we talked about cross-hatching. Different ways you can cross-hatch. The weave pattern. And we talked about stippling. Basically making dots, series of dots. Stippling is very tedious. It's a very tedious activity. I don't like to stipple very often because it is very time consuming. However, it does have a neat effect to it, and it has a neat look to it. I do prefer the idea of cross-hatching in my drawings much more than I do using stippling. Alright, so cross-hatching and stippling. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you guys today about, since I have a little bit of time, is iterative drawing. So what is iterative drawing? Iterative drawing is basically the idea of drawing the same thing consistently over and over again and getting better at it each time. You are reiterating what you learned, basically. So, for instance, if I drew a series of heads shapes, for instance, the more I draw these series of head shapes, the more it gives me more ideas of where to take them over time. So it's kind of like creating a way to give yourself mileage in your drawings. You're creating more drawings over a series of time rather than working on one drawing. You have several ideas over a series of time, over a shorter span of time, which are going to give you more ideas to play with. And this is how I always sketch. Whenever I'm in a sketchbook, I'm not looking for a finalized, finished drawing when I'm in a sketchbook. I'm looking for a way to get my ideas out on paper in an iterative way that will serve me a greater foundation to take these ideas and build upon them in more finalized states. It's almost the same as an illustrator. As an illustrator, the illustrator creates thumbnails of how they see things going on in the picture. You know, it could be a scribble. How do you see these things before you actually create a finalized drawing? And that's always the way that I go about things when I draw. So I figured I would just give you guys a little bit of a foundation and show you guys some of the basic things that I draw. I'm no expert by any means. These are things I like to share with you guys because I found that over the period of time that I've been drawing and painting, they have always helped me. So, and I hope these things help you guys too. I really believe highly in the idea of iterative drawing because you are getting more drawing in a shorter amount of time than you are to just create one finalized drawing, which is fine. I see a lot of people that actually create finalized drawings, and they'll spend hours upon hours upon hours on one drawing, which is great, absolutely great. But when you're in a sketchbook, I always suggest people to do iterative drawing because it gets your stuff out, it gets the ideas out of your head, and it gives you new ideas to play with over a period of time. So, all right, so that's it for the first episode. I really hope that you guys enjoyed everything. I'm going to keep doing these. I'm going to keep getting better at doing these things for you guys and explaining more and more. There's so much to learn in art. I do not know it all. And I'm still learning every day after 10 years consistently of doing these things. But I do want to share my ideas. So, and I hope that they help you. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will answer your questions. All right. Thank you.